And me and my best friend, we'd been arguing that day. So whenever I left, we were texting back and forth, and I was determined to get my point across, so I wasn't gonna, stop texting her just so I could drive.
That's the thought process that is taking the lives of countless teenagers every day. According to the Department of Transportation, cell phones are involved in 1.6 million accidents a year, causing 500,000 injuries and 6,000 deaths. The decision to text and drive is one that Melanie Porter knows all too well.
I've been dancing for 13 years, so it wasn't like I didn't know this road, and we were just listening to music, and they were doing their thing, and I was just driving, and I don't really know what happened. I looked down, and I didn't have time to take control of the car, and as soon as I looked up, it was too late.
We almost hit the guardrail. We missed it by about half of a foot and ran off down into a ravine. And I think I was the only one that stayed conscious through the whole thing. I looked over at Melanie, and her head was laying on the airbag, and she was bleeding all over the place. And I was shaking her, telling her to get up. Melanie, wake up, and she never would respond. And so I turned around, and Carly was laying on the ground out of the back seat, and she wasn't conscious either. She wouldn't move.
With it being April Fool's Day, nobody would stop or help. They thought it was some kind of joke. Well, finally we got someone who was an off-duty paramedic, and they came and they called the ambulance and everybody. And I was airlifted because I was stuck in the car. I guess, being so close to the dash, it just kind of closed in on my legs. But Emily and Carly, they rode in the ambulance. There wasn't anything major wrong with us, just a few broken bones and stuff like that. But we're very lucky because I shouldn't have been texting and driving in the first place.
According to one study, 56% of teenagers admit to texting on their cell phones behind the wheel, while 13% admit to texting while driving. Of all the cell phone-related distractions, texting has proven to be the most fatal. For every 6 seconds of drive time, a driver sending or receiving a text message spends 1.6 of those seconds with their eyes off the road. When Melanie Porter turned her focus from the highway to her phone, it almost meant no prom and an even bigger loss for the 3 Cordova High School girls. They all know it could have been much worse.
All 3 of us were affected differently by the car wreck. Prom was 3 days after our wreck, and it was my senior prom, and I refused to stay in the hospital and not go. So that morning when I got out, all 3 of us were at the prom. We weren't ourselves by any means, but we still tried to make the best of it. Carly had scars and cuts all up and down her arms and her back, and I had a punctured lung and a broken cheekbone. And Melanie, I think she probably got the worst end of the deal because she was affected more mentally than she was physically. She didn't really recognize anybody. She wouldn't speak. She felt like it was all her fault that all 3 of us almost died, and I don't know, I feel really bad for her because that still gets to her every day, but never again will I text while I drive or let anybody text while I'm riding with them.
Melanie and her 2 passengers came home healthy to their families after a couple of days in the hospital. They even got to go to the prom, but it wasn't as fun as they had always imagined.
I had a really bad concussion, and so it was hard for me to recognize people and remember things, and I went about 2 weeks without speaking to anyone or talking to anyone just because I was so depressed because it was all my fault that I hurt the other 2 girls, and thinking of what could have happened, it scared me, so I just stayed quiet and I was really upset. And
today, Melanie strongly opposes any texting while driving, but there are plenty of teens that still feel that using a cell phone on the road is not a problem. She has a few words of advice to anyone who thinks differently.
Living with the guilt was worse than any other scratch or bruise or concussion.
Emily says it was a life-changing experience that she hopes others will learn from before it's too late.
Before, it was like an everyday thing. I never really paid any attention to it. I'd text while I drove all the time, and if I was riding with somebody and they were texting while they were driving, I didn't pay any attention to it. But now, I refuse to ride with anybody if they text while they drive, or if they are, I'll take the phone from them and text it if it can't wait. But honestly, 3 lives isn't worth 1 text message.